Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and the godfather of the imagination, thanks to Hassan Chavez. I love that one. And finally, last but not least, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert and Meyer Burnett coming at you. Or should I say, Robcasting at you. Robcasting from the Robservatory at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity, on this Memorial Day. Shout out, by the way, to my dad, who's no longer with us. My dad was in World War II. He once flew on a plane with Douglas MacArthur, but he was in communications stationed in Alaska. So he didn't exactly see combat, but he was still an essential worker. And I think we should all take time to remember those who are no longer with us, those fighting men and women who are populating our armed forces today, the ones that have in the past, and actually everybody that we've lost recently. That's what Memorial Day is all about. And you know what else Memorial Day is all about? Star Wars. In addition to that, Star Wars. Memorial Day weekend. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is the 43rd anniversary of the release of Star Wars. We just had the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back. Now is the 43rd anniversary of Star Wars, released on this day on May 25th, 1977. It opened in my hometown at the UA 150, where I actually saw it. I believe it opened on a Wednesday. I saw it the following Sunday, so the first weekend it opened. So that's pretty exciting. And I've got a pretty good show today. But first, I have a question. I have a question that I want to throw out to you, you imagination connoisseurs. I want you guys to weigh in. You guys, you girls, you gentle people, you beings from all around the 28 known galaxies. So, as everyone knows, as I'm wearing yet another of my... I love my geeky t-shirts. I've always loved my geeky t-shirts. And when they pop up on Facebook, or I go to Last Exit to Nowhere, which sells my favorite geeky t-shirts, no, they don't sponsor this show. So at John Campia's live event for his 1 million views party, I met some great people, some of our great fans, and I was given by one of those fans a t-shirt that I love, but I've never worn. And I've never worn it because it's always given me pause. It shouldn't give me pause. But in this day and age, it gives me pause. And it gives me pause because I'm wondering, as a, white, cis, middle-aged male, otherwise known as the scourge of the universe, I wondered if I wore the shirt. I wanted to wear the shirt so many times, and I've never worn it. And I wonder, would it be a problem for me to wear the shirt? I don't think so. I love this shirt, and I'm going to show it to you, and I want you to tell me what you think. Han Cholo. Han Cholo. That's the shirt. Harrison Ford as a Cholo. Now, Cholo has a long history as a word, as a thing, as a description, and I'm just wondering, is it okay to wear this shirt in this day and age? And I think it's funny that I have to stop and think and ask this question. But I'm going to. I'm asking the question. What do you guys think? I love this shirt. It's a good, comfortable shirt. It was given to me by a Mexican fan, and I'm sure that they probably wouldn't have a problem with it because they gave it to me. But I'm just curious. Every time I go to wear this shirt, I stop and I think, should I wear this? Can a gringo like me? I mean, it's not like I'm a Launda. I'm not. And I don't want to offend anyone by wearing this shirt. And it just gives me pause. Every time I've got my cool, geeky t-shirts. I fold them all up, and they're all nice. And I always get to this one, and I always stop and don't put it on. Recently, the person who gave this shirt to me asked why I never wore it. And I figured, well, it's Star Wars Day. It's Han Cholo. I would ask, what do you think? Can I get away with wearing this shirt? I think I can, but perhaps someone has an alternative point of view. I'm curious what you all think. With that, there is a lot of fun stuff to talk about today, all movie related. On this Memorial Day, I wanted to sort of make it happy. Not that every day isn't happy here on the old Robservations, but there's some really fun, interesting news, all movie related, all Hollywood related, that I wanted to talk about. As you know, it's not topical news, but news the way I like it. News about the business of Hollywood. Now, this first one, this was published yesterday in Entertainment Weekly. It's by Clark Collis. And if you haven't seen this news, this is very exciting. My friend Ed Polgardi produced this movie. How low budget horror movie The Wretched became America's #1 film. The supernatural shocker expanded to 45 drive-ins this weekend. I've known Ed for a long time. He's a very effective producer, one of the producers on this. I've only heard good things about this movie. I haven't seen this movie, but I've only heard good things. But I wanted to share it with you. It comes from IFC Midnight. At the start of the year, the biggest movies set to be released in May looked like Fast and the Furious 9, Spiral from the Book of Saw, Black Widow, Scoob, and Artemis Fowl. Instead, the coronavirus outbreak prompted studios to either postpone the movie's premieres or announce that they would debut on a streaming service. The most successful new film, according to Box Office Mojo, this is crazy, has been a supernatural indie horror movie called The Wretched, which has dominated the website's daily chart since it was released on May 1st. As of Thursday, The Wretched, about a teenager who discovers that a malevolent witch is living next door to his father, had been the #1 film in America for 3 weeks. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people going, Rob, theaters are closed. So no. I'm taking this one as a victory for everybody involved with The Wretched. How cool is this? Good for them. Don't ever think that just because we're in... There's no caveat. I know there's going to be some hashtag or parenthetical disclaimer about this. But you know what? As a low-budget indie horror producer myself, I want to throw out the kudos to Ed and the entire production team involved with The Wretched, because this is very cool. It's actually been a complete shock and kind of insane, says the Detroit-raised Brett Pierce, who directed the film with his brother Drew. We were a little movie from Michigan. We always aimed for the moon, but with an independent film you think, yeah, we'll come out in a few theaters, we'll play for like a week, and maybe 10 people will see it. Most people are going to see it when we land on a streaming service at some point. Each week, it just kept on getting bigger. It was one of those things where you just don't believe it as it's happening. We're going to be a Jeopardy question one day, because we're going to be the lowest grossing, most successful film. You know what, Mr. Pierce, Brett, and Drew, revel in your time, as Terrell told Roy Batty. Look at this. You know what? If I had made a movie in my career, and maybe someday I will, that had this picture, if my film was #1 on a drive-in billboard, I would say my life as a filmmaker is complete. Hopefully I'd make more movies, but this is pretty amazing. The success of The Wretched is not simply down to lack of competition. With multiplexes closing across the country in March, the movie's distributors, IFC Midnight, pivoted and began to reach out to drive-ins to see if they were interested in booking the film. IFC were planning a release probably in 15 theaters and then a COVID hit, says Brett. The release date was set and it wasn't going to change, says Drew. For a while, there it was. Well, guys, it's not going to be in any theaters, but we're still going to come out on VOD. We were disappointed at first, but then completely understood because of the pandemic. Then they mentioned drive-ins, said Brett. Every week, IFC would be like, we've got these couple more drive-ins that are open, that are safe, and are willing to play it, says Drew. And then a couple of more days would go by, and, oh, there's a couple more. They eventually opened it up on 12, I think, and we were like, oh, wow, we came out in 12, looks like quite a few people came and saw it. We were like, that's probably the best we're ever going to do. And then each week, they kept on adding more drive-ins, and the movie kept getting more people there. As of last Thursday, the film had grossed just over $350,000 at the box office. That's not a figure that would have anybody in a major studio dancing down the aisles, but it's much better than nothing, and actually not bad at all for an indie film made for very little money. It would be considered low budget, says Brett. I don't use that term because it automatically makes people think there's something wrong with it. The budget was not a lot. To give you a sense, there were a couple of nights I slept on the couch for the wardrobe department because there weren't enough places to stay. Both the brothers have attended outdoor screenings of The Wretched. whose release this weekend expanded further to over 45 drive-ins. I've seen it. It sounds terrible. I've seen it 3 times, says Brett with a laugh. I actually went last night. That was super surreal, says Drew, of watching the film Under the Stars. I felt like I was being transported back to when I was 10, when my dad would take me to, like, Planet of the Apes marathons at the drive-in in Detroit. But it was a really good feeling. The funniest part, though, most drive-ins, the sound plays through your FM radio. Our sound designer is this really super talented guy. He did all this work on the movie, and he texted me like, so my 7.1 sound mix is playing through your car stereo? I was like, yeah, sorry, man, but it's so cool. Brett admits that he's reluctant to overly celebrate the film's success given the current circumstances. It's a weird thing for Drew and I, he says. We're really happy with the success of the movie, but also feel bad about being happy when things are so dark for people. When you tell yourself it's safe escapism, we're a little bit relieved when things aren't so nice. You know what? I would say, Brett, Drew, you should absolutely be proud, because you know what the reality of life is, especially with all of human civilization? It's always been dark. Somewhere it's always been dark. On places on this planet, it is dark every single day. And any time through your work, you can bring some joy to people, even in the darkest times. Remember, what boomed during the Great Depression? Hollywood, movies. People were going to the movies to escape their financial realities. And you know what? What a cool way to do it. I mean, if anything, horror films have a great drive-in tradition, and the demise of the drive-in is something that, you know, is kind of sad. But to see a horror film like yours, I assume it's your first film, congratulations to you guys. Revel in your time. This is fantastic. Nicely done, sirs, and enjoy your success. I want to mention now, if I haven't before, you all know, that this weekend is the Mainframe Comic Con. On May 30th and 31st this weekend, I will be moderating a few discussions, and I'll tell you more about it when we get closer. But, of course, one is with Lisa Emery, who plays Mrs. Snell on Ozark. I can't wait. I'll be doing this on Sunday, and I'm also going to be having a conversation with John Noble, Denethor himself, who was on Fringe. He's done everything. I'm very excited that they asked me back to moderate these conversations. So thank you to the Mainframe Mainframe Comic Con. And the first time I did it, it was really good, really well run. They were raising money for charity, and I think they're doing the same thing now because it was such a success. And it's great that they just decided to do it very quickly and get another one off the ground. So I think that's pretty dope. And now another thing that I want to address, another news story that I thought was interesting that's going to affect all of us, is this was in Variety today, and it was published this morning. Korean box office has... let's see. Can I get this out there without... see, I'm going to have to bring it out. Look at that. Oh, well. You're going to have to look at it. I'm spilling over. I'm spilling over my frame, and I apologize for that. You know what? I screwed it up. Anyway, you've seen the picture. I'll just go to full frame. How about that? You can watch me technically screw up my own show. Anyway, I thought this was really worth sharing because, as everyone knows, you know, is Warner Brothers going to... Are they going to release Tenet on its July 17th release date? Is it going to happen? Are we going to be able to see Unhinged, the Russell Crowe road rage movie? Are we going to see that? That looks really good to me. I don't know, but I think we can look at Korea since they had their first coronavirus death the same day that we did. So this was, of course, put today on Variety at 4:30 this morning. Korean box office has yet to find post-coronavirus new normal. South Korean cinemas have reopened, but business is far from normal. Nationwide box office over the weekend trickled in at just 7% of what it was this time last year. And with Hollywood's direct players and local distributors reluctant to release big titles since the outbreak of coronavirus in the country, screens have been filled with re-releases and small to mid-sized foreign films. Unusually, not a single Korean film appeared in the weekend's top 10 chart. American musical drama The Greatest Showman reopened on Thursday and took the top spot, earning $205,600 over opening 5 days. Other re-releases that appeared on the top 10 spots include 2018's action comedy, The Hitman's Bodyguard, the Japanese animation, Weathering with You, Chinese director Chang Cage's historical drama, Farewell My Concubine, which is great, The Platform, which is a terrific Spanish, I guess you'd call it dystopian horror film. If you haven't seen The Platform, walk, don't run to Netflix and watch. I mean, run, don't walk to Netflix and see this. The Platform, which has been released on global streaming platform Netflix, outside of Korea and Taiwan, received a theatrical release on May 13th and has managed to earn $387,000 after 2 weekends. The only newcomers of the weekends, the French rom-com La Belle Époque, American war drama The Last Full Measure, opened in 3rd and 8th, respectively. I don't think The Last Full Measure is here. A couple of local mainstream films that have been scheduled for May outings, including Sony and Kadari Entertainment's Innocence and Ace Maker Movie Works' Intruder, will now open in early June. Now, understandable. These are older movies. These are not new blockbusters opening, but it still doesn't necessarily bode well for people flocking to the movies. Now, does that mean what's going to happen in Korea is exactly what's going to happen here? No. Judging by the way Americans want to get out of the house, and we've seen what's going to happen, I think probably a lot of people will flock to the movie theaters, but we're going to know. I mean, we're going to know in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where the COVID cases are. Have they continued to go down? In California, they're not going down. Other states, they're not going down either. Where are we going to be in 2 weeks? As we all know, the COVID-19 situation can change on a daily and weekly basis pretty drastically. So, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I can't make that call one way or another. Now, the topic at hand, yesterday you heard me read a Medium column by Richard Janes, who I don't know. Richard Janes is somebody whose work I've been reading over the last month. He's basically been speculating about the future of the entertainment industry. I find his work incredibly compelling. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but I think for the most part, I mean, he's talking about what's going to happen in the future, and I think what he has to say is very, very sound. You don't see a lot of this happening, the way he's pulling all these things together, and I really think what he's saying is important to listen to. And I reached out to him and asked if I could do one of my interviews like I did for the 400th episode of Robservations, and he graciously agreed, so I'm trying to set a time up with him to do that interview. But before then, here is his last column that was released on May 22nd, and I really think this is very important to share, and I thought all of you would be interested. Especially, I would like to direct you to watch the Disney Gallery 4th episode of their Mandalorian documentary series. That was the last episode released. That has a lot of their stagecraft, which I've been doing columns on and doing shows about. Columns. I didn't do any columns. I just did shows about their stagecraft technology that they're using to realize the Mandalorian, which is going to become huge in the industry. Well, Richard Janes wrote about it, and I wanted to share it with you. So if you haven't seen episode 4 of The Mandalorian, I would suggest you do so, not necessarily before you watch this, but certainly in conjunction with what I am about to read. I have to tell you, all of this just excites me to no end. So here it is, Richard Janes' article published on May 22nd. The Great Film Production Renaissance, Are You Ready? During times of struggle, the inevitable is often accelerated. Companies that were dying go bust. New ways of working that were once seen as too disruptive to the established norm or simply too expensive are fully embraced in order to survive. Companies that innovate thrive and new voices find their place. The film industry is one such industry that has just started a major metamorphosis. What will become known as the Great Film Production Renaissance has begun. Make no mistake, it's going to affect everyone. I've spoken at length about changes that are afoot within distribution, exhibition, agents, producers, and audience ownership, which will each contribute to this renaissance. But today, it's the crew and support vendors' turn. You didn't think they'd be left untouched, did you? A new way to make films and TV. Reduced crew sizes, minimal extras, reduced international travel, restricted contact with key personnel are the key dictates that are being passed down by studios, networks, and insurance companies especially in the insurance companies, in an attempt to get productions back to work and minimize the risk of COVID-19 infections, which could stall a production and inflict millions of dollars worth of damages to a production. With these forced adjustments will come new norms and cost savings that will be hard to roll back when the all clear is given and a viable vaccination is available en masse. Now, before you roll your eyes or dismiss what I'm about to say, know that all of this is already in motion. From the biggest tentpole movies and TV shows, The Jungle Book, The Mandalorian, etc., through to the most innovative indie filmmakers working in a garage, such as Seth Eicherman and Blood Machines. And if you haven't seen Blood Machines on Shudder, what are you waiting for? Watch it. If you don't know who Seth Eicherman is, it's actually two guys. And if you haven't seen Turbo Killer on YouTube, look it up. Carpenter Brute does the music and Seth Eicherman does the videos. It is the perfect distillation of Euro horror and sci-fi from the 80s. I mean, if you haven't seen either Turbo Killer, which is a music video, or Blood Machines, which is more of a long-form story, do yourself a favor. Look, if you don't love techno or darkwave or synthwave or whatever you want to call it, you might not dig it. But if you don't know what Turbo Killer is, go to YouTube, punch in Turbo Killer, watch it. And then go to their Kickstarter page, watch their behind-the-scenes footage. Seth Eicherman, those two dudes are crushing it, and Carpenter Brute rules. And Elizabeth and I actually went and saw Carpenter Brute when he was in town. Anyway. Reduced crew sizes, minimal extras, reduced international travel, restricted contact, blah, I read that. With these forced adjustments will come new norms and cost savings that will be hard to roll back when the all clear is given and a viable vaccination is available en masse. Now, before you roll your eyes or dismiss what I'm about to say, know that all of this, I already read that. You already know, I read that again, sorry. Though the most innovative indie filmmakers working in a garage, yes, it has not gone mainstream yet, but that is about to change. And again, look at what Seth Eicherman did with Blood Machines. On May 13th, 2020, Epic Games announced their new Epic Games Unreal Engine 5, which will be released publicly later in the year. By the way, again, if you have not seen the video, their demonstration of Unreal Engine 5, oh my God, that is also on YouTube. Go watch that. The Unreal Engine allows game developers to create photoreal visuals that are extraordinary. With such rapid advancements from Unreal, as well as others in the VR space, such as Unity, Blender, etc., it is only a matter of time before it impacts film departments in every production around the world. The future. The future of film and TV will see a huge amount of projects vying for the limited sound stages that are available around the world. Sound stages where crews don't have to travel. The environment can be controlled, and the economies of scale can be achieved through reduced unit moves, etc. The use of these stages is nothing new, but what is revolutionary is the use of 3D photoreal worlds. Green screen and LED screen technology such as Lux Machina's high-resolution 8K video backdrops that will become common shooting practice in the industry. Yes, there will be people that hold out and say it will never be as good, just as we saw with the movement from silent to talkies and most recently from film to digital. But this technological advancement will mean that in the not-too-distant future, film crews heading out to multiple locations with big base camps taking up street space and having to deal with the limitations of a real-world environment will be a rarer occurrence on a shooting schedule, and one that will most likely be met with a groan from the crew who've got accustomed to all the benefits of a single place of work. Now, the digital camera revolution took 15 years. This is going to be a lot quicker. Pixar led the way, matching storytellers with technologies to push one another to greater heights, but it was incredibly expensive. Today, a filmmaker can team with a game developer or VFX artist and build amazing worlds. This is quite different from the process and pipeline for traditional CGI, and so much cheaper, especially with the future of content library licensing or brand product tourism placements, which I'll get to in a moment. Take, for example, this test, which was shot by Seattle-based filmmaker VFX artist Ian Hubert, who built this world in Blender and filmed the actress in a small homemade studio. Now, I won't play this, but here's the video. You should go watch this because it's amazing, and it shows you the future. Now, if you think this will only work for a sci-fi work, take a look at the video below that reveals just how much of last year's Academy Award winner was green screen and you didn't even notice. Shooting this today could be even more green screen, or much of the house could have been a video backdrop given how spaced out the rooms are. Again, look at this video. Watch this. It's astonishing. It's not a big leap to see. Here, let me just put that on for a little bit more. You can go check that out. So get that. It's not a big leap to see filmmakers lean into even more of these VR environments. With a little bit of imagination, it's easy to see how 60 to 80% of all TV shows and movies we watch, especially outdoor scenes, large rooms, or vistas through windows, will, in the very near future, actually be billions of digital triangles, or nanites, as the folks at Unreal Epic Games call them, that make up these 3D worlds. And the majority of all productions will be studio-based, or at the very least, one key location that could double up for many different locations. The advanced gaming technology coming online as we speak is literally a game changer. Rapid adoption will be driven by the impact of COVID-19 and the need for entertainment businesses to protect themselves from any future lockdowns, be it from COVID or another virus. But as more productions embrace these models, it will be the overall cost savings that will pave the way for this way of shooting to become the dominant way of making movies. Filmmakers from around the world will no longer be confined to budget and geographical location access to shoot their stories. They no longer need massive crews to support their roaming villages, and they can make projects at a scale that would have shocked David Lean, all from the confines of a small gymnasium and an online network of global digital artists who can earn a decent living working away from the West's major metropolises and their associated costs of living. It's going to take a big mental shift for some. Some have already made the leap, as we see in The Mandalorian. Watch episode 4 of The Gallery. And some will come out of nowhere, VR natives that have a story that they're burning to tell. Here's what we're going to see. Here's what we're going to see, some big changes for production and film crews. Sound stages. We all know there's a massive need for sound stages driven by the spike in content demand. The cost to build these 20,000 square foot stages is huge. The larger stages will still be in demand, but expect to see a huge amount of productions needing a couple of 3,000 to 7,500 square foot video backdrop stages instead. In the video below, you can see how Disney Plus's The Mandalorian shot a good number of scenes, around 50% of the series, in a 1,500 square foot video space. Again, watch this. I can't. It's amazing. Under the new way of shooting, sweaty minivan drives scouting physical locations are kept to a minimum. Instead, the camera team can spend their pre-production time in vertical worlds mapping out camera angles and testing lenses as they will look in the final movie. This will give rise to more creativity as the options become endless. Move a wall in a 200-year-old building? No problem. Travel down from the top spire of a cathedral to land on a master close-up of our leading actor? Easy. The options are endless. The realm of the camera department will become restricted to shooting scenes with talent. All those establishing shots, cutaways of props, etc. will grab them in post, and because we now have access to locations whenever we want, the idea of pickups and reshoots becomes easy. Load up the background and we're ready to go. Expect previs heads of departments to become a key member of the camera team, similar to the way a storyboard artist might have worked closely with the director and DP. In the case of productions that utilize video backdrops, you'll find that the traditional VFX team that have thus far worked in post-production will now work in pre-production alongside the director and DP, director of photography, setting everything up for the actual shoot. Locations teams is going to go through a big change. Scouts will be sent to find the perfect location just as they are now, but the past concerns about crew parking, size of the rooms for camera and lighting, availability of hotels for cast and crew, etc., plus the proximity to other locations will all go out the window. Instead, photos will be taken and a director will approve the interior of a house in Kansas be matched with the exterior of a house in Oklahoma. Once the location has been approved, the locations team will go back to the location with their new photogrammetry tech team and spend a day or two capturing mega scans of the location and all the items in the room. No big crew, no massive transportation team. That location forevermore is captured on a hard drive. And you can see the possibilities of that. Libraries of locations that have already been scanned that you can license. For major studios, they will retain the worldwide rights for that location, and they'll be able to build their own location libraries with locations being able to be reskinned and adjusted based on the production designer and director's vision. But there will be a ton of independent films that will be capturing locations, and several virtual film location libraries will emerge. We're already seeing this in the gaming industry where you can buy a 3D castle, a hut, a 10-acre forest, or an exact replica of the Oval Office for between $25 to $1,500 a license. A lot less than the $1,500 to $15,000 daily location fee, plus other costs for a real-world location. Major known locations and environments will do exclusive deals with libraries for their Megascan 3D environments. Think Christchurch Cathedral in Oxford for Harry Potter, Al-Khazneh, the giant sandstone temple in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Alcatraz, Grand Central Station in New York. You'll be able to shoot scenes in all of them for a fraction of what it would usually cost and from the comfort of your own studio base, wherever that might be. The props department's going to be split in two. We'll have the traditional hand props, which will be small numbers of physical props that the actors need to touch, and then the digital props. Props buyers will be able to scour digital libraries to purchase licenses for all the dressing props they'll need to put into environments. Just as with locations, there are fortunes to be made from these digital prop libraries, and again, they already exist in the gaming world where you can purchase a license to a set of roadwork props, lights, signs, diggers, etc. for $25. Companies will emerge that will team with traditional prop houses and 3D scan their entire inventory. Independent prop buyers will search the world, scanning props and uploading them to the libraries, where they earn a $10 license fee over and over and over again for years without purchasing the original prop, storing it, or having to fix it when it breaks. Essentially, prop masters will become IP owners in this new world. Yes, many of these could be built from scratch in the digital realm, but many filmmakers will prefer to use real-world objects that have been digitized so they retain their unique scratches and nicks. They'll believe that it adds more authenticity. Just as there is a cost for renting locations, moving unit bases, permits, facility vehicles, overtime for wrapping out, etc., there will be costs to creating these 360-degree environments. But with the libraries available, as we have seen within the gaming community, expect the cost to come down drastically from what we have come to expect from traditional VFX budgets. In addition to this, expect product placement teams to start getting really busy. Brands and tourism locations will have a vested interest in mega-scanning their products and locations, and, subject to the filmmaker's restricted use to ensure nothing untoward goes on around the brand, they will make their scans available for free and for possible pay-to-play fees on larger productions. You need a car? Toyota will have their full lineup mega-scanned and ready for you. Need a living room? The entire IKEA product line will have been scanned, including many of the rooms they mock up in their showrooms. 4 different Starbucks cafes, 3 different McDonald's layouts, a Boeing 737 from American Airlines Eurostar station and trains, the Thunder Chesapeake's Energy Arena, the Bellagio in Vegas, or a full Marriott hotel will all be made available for movies and TV shows to use without any impact on their ability to serve customers in the, quote, real world. In addition to this, the impact that tourism already sees when a location is used in a movie. The beach was responsible for a 22% increase in tourism to Thailand, and the house used in Downton Abbey is selling an extra $500,000 worth of admission tickets each year, means that aggressive tourism departments at any country, state, and local level could see a massive benefit from mega-scanning their key locations and making them available to filmmakers. Talent contracts are going to become interesting with this one. First, expect to see the number of background artists drop drastically. This was going to happen with COVID-19 anyway, only now with each frame requiring digital work, the effort to bring in digital extras will be minimal. There will always be a demand for real background artists that will be seen close to the talent for sure, but anything further away or out of focus, they'll be digital. Now to the contracts. Expect all cast members will be scanned at the start of production. These scans will then be used as a backdrop for additional shots, over the shoulders, etc., where supplementary support is needed. Now the question comes about the IP rights to these digital representations. Obviously, reuse rights will be heavily restricted and security measures in place to make sure they don't get leaked. But for the big stars, I wouldn't be surprised to see a model or two credit or similar, whereby, just as with an actor's personal makeup and hairstylist, the actor insists that it is only his or her own person that oversees the use of their virtual model in any movie. This extends control and supervision over how they're being used in the production. Most actors can all tell the story of being stuck in their trailer as lighting, set dressing, camera, or a grip run behind, resulting in the talent being given just 5 minutes to perform as production is running over schedule. In our new future, to perform as production is running over schedule. In this future, production becomes more about the actor's performance than ever before, but as many who have worked on green screen will tell you, it takes a particular skill and the ability to really act and react to what is not there, which is why as soon as the cost of video backdrops comes down, which it will do thanks to Moore's Law, this will become the method of choice for everyone over green screen. Now, many in the Unreal space will say the true future of CGI actors, such as the influencer that Hollywood talent agency CAA just signed, but that's not going to happen mainstream for a long time as audiences are drawn by other humans. It's the reason why animated movies use celebrities for voiceover of lending characters versus unknown actors who would be cheaper. Makeup and hair. We're seeing it already in the gaming world where they're turning to Hollywood artists to help create lifelike digital people. Makeup and hair artists will have to start to understand the technical jargon and workflow processes to assist in post-production and ensure the bleeding between reality and VR is seamless. In addition, there's going to be much more scrutiny over their work. Just as HD changed the game because the details it captured, VR will bring a whole new set of obstacles as actors' faces are captured in greater detail and in close-up for every setup so that models can be perfectly replicated for additional footage if needed. Mistakes have the ability to be compounded once taken into the digital world. Hair and makeup have the opportunity to be on productions longer as they are needed in post-production to advise and consult on how characters are showing up. Costumes. Now this is an interesting one. Traditional costume for leading actors will still be vitally important, but expect all clothing to be scanned for future use, together with costume buyers finding a new business as they scan clothing for background use down the line. Expect Angels of London, one of the top costume rental houses in the world with over 1 million outfits, to digitally capture all of their inventory and offer it for license. Why not use the same one uniform for all digital soldiers? Because filmmakers will want to get as close to real life as possible, and each uniform carries its own story in terms of wear and tear and its details, like this, that graduate VR into the real world. John McInnes of McInnes Studios just did this with an original David Bowie costume, and retailers such as Abercrombie and Fitch have been scanning vintage clothing for years to replicate wear and tear for their products. But this won't just be the realm of major costume houses. There will be independent costume finders who look for different costumes that they might be able to license, scan, and upload to libraries, just as photographers have been doing for years with platforms like Getty Images. Again, IP for costumers. Times are changing. To close this out, I mentioned Epic Games' announcement about the Unreal Engine 5, and I couldn't leave without showing you the amazing detail that's coming from this engine. I'm not a fan of the character or camera work, but you can certainly see how these environments can be used in film. And remember, just as we've seen with streaming services, HQs being located outside of Hollywood, these major gaming companies aren't located in La La Land either. For example, Epic Games is based in Cary, North Carolina, and Blender is based in Amsterdam. With such developments happening outside of Southern California, it underlines the erosion of geographic dominance for our entire industry. By the way, if you haven't seen this, this is amazing. So you can find that on YouTube. These are truly exciting times. Changes are happening in every corner of the industry, and there are huge opportunities for people to tell highly impactful stories, limited only by their imagination, that can find a niche audience who can be communicated with at the touch of a button. But even with all of this, just as it did 100 years ago, the key is a great story. If you don't have a great story on paper to begin with, it doesn't matter who has the power, what the distribution options are, or what technology is available for you to film. Story, story, story. Never underestimate the power of story. What are your thoughts on this new way of working? By the way, you can find Richard Janes on Twitter at Richard Janes, RICHARDJANES, or at www.richardjanes.com. And as I said, I will be doing an interview with him hopefully this week, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday. I'll keep you abreast of when I am doing that. And let me put this article into the live chat so you can find all of the links. There you go. Yeah. So it's very exciting. By the way, now is the time when I'm going to mention that speaking of horror movies, the film I produced, The Hills Run Red, is finally coming to Blu-ray. It's finally coming out on Blu-ray from Scream Factory. Director Dave Parker and I are very excited, along with writer David Scow, that The Hills Run Red's finally coming to Blu-ray. And as I've told you a million times, Dave and I, as we've been sequestered at home, created 6.5 new hours of special features in addition to my half-hour featurette that I did 12 years ago or 11 years ago, and the original audio commentary. So check it out. It's available June 16th from shoutfactory.com, or you can go to Amazon or wherever you buy your discs. and check it out. Well, the thing about Richard Janes is he's absolutely right. And all of this technology, this disruptive technology, is going to ultimately be great. Now, while the Mandalorian tech is still prohibitively expensive for the indie filmmaker, I do think, once the things that we're going to be able to do is amazing. And again, like Richard said, it's all story, story, story. I'm really excited about this because at one point, as people know who know that I was involved in the Axanar, I guess we call it debacle now, but the idea was I knew this was coming. And I did want to have a studio facility to continue to make movies, whether they were fan films, other people could have fan films. We had the facility, unfortunately we don't anymore, where we could have had a great place to do this. I'm still always in the market to do those kinds of things. One of the things that I learned, it kind of relates back to what I was reading about yesterday, the Richard Janes article I was reading yesterday. When I left Warner Brothers and in the early 90s, I was working at Full Moon Entertainment. Now, when you talk about building a brand, Charlie Band with Full Moon, whether it was the Trancers movies, the Subspecies movies, Doll Man, Demonic Toys, the Puppet Master movies, any of those films, we had a facility, we had a production facility, and we had a huge fan base, and we were making a movie a month. And we were putting them out through Paramount. Paramount was our distributor. And unfortunately, let's just say without pointing fingers, that the money was not managed as well as it should have been, because it was a phenomenal place to work. Can you imagine you're working at a place making one genre movie a month, and these movies had budgets of about $1 million, and you can go back and look at them. A lot of people grew up with Full Moon movies. I loved working there at the time. I edited Arcade with Peter Billingsley. It was the first time I actually edited a feature film, was there. Thank you, Dan Schweiger. And then I started working with Dave Parker, the director of The Hills Run Red, in the promotions department, cutting trailers and behind-the-scenes material. And I always wanted to do that. I always thought, okay, if I could spend my life making low-budget genre fare, but intelligent genre fare. I wouldn't have wanted to make the kind of movies that Full Moon made, but it was a very fun place to be. We had effects guys. Everybody was at the same place. We had our big production facility. We had the big sound stage. We had the effects shops, and everybody was working together. And it was just delightful. It was a wonderful place to work, and I've always wanted to do that again. And that has been my dream, is to put together a production facility and just crank out material. And hopefully to you guys, part of the reason to be on YouTube is to develop your own audience, and hopefully I would be able to deliver material that would be directed at the imagination connoisseur audience that you are. The Post-Geek Singularity would be the audience, the very audience that I would be marketing directly to. Hopefully that it would spill out over into the real world, because you'd need more people. But as I build the fan base here, that's what I want to do for you guys, and then make this entire audience participate in the process. That's my end game, is to be able to make movies. I'd love to make 2 or 3 movies a year myself. And when you have a team of people, when you have a crew on staff that's just being paid every week, and you're constantly making movies, and you have ways to finance them, it can be done. And I would love to do that. So I think what's really interesting is that Richard Janes, there's other people talking about this in the industry, but I think he's been doing a really good job at distilling all of this down into easily digestible and understandable material. And it's really got me excited. Can you tell? I'm very excited about the possibilities here. So, we'll see where it goes. And I'm really looking forward to getting out after Tango Shalom hopefully gets out into the world, and I'll be doing a lot more things that you'll be finding out about, and we shall see. We shall see. And, it's Memorial Day. It's a holiday, but I figured I would begin today's letters with, would anybody be surprised to know that the lovely, lovely Willow Yang wrote me another letter? And after finally seeing her, she is always and forever going to be the lovely Willow Yang, as opposed to some mysterious woman that's just out in the ether. What a cutie she is. But she's also a genius. And I love her writing, and she's a microbiologist, and she's going to be a doctor. She's going to become a doctor while she's a part of the Post-Geek Singularity. She can be, we already have Jacob Fudge and his Comic Relief as our adoptive comic book store, the first Burnettwork, the first Robservations comic book store. Willow Yang will be the first doctor, and we can all adopt her as our imagination connoisseur doctor. I mean, I'll have to get her a T-shirt or something. But anyway, Willow Yang is back with another letter. Oh, Willow. Greetings, Rob. Although every time I see Greetings, Rob, I feel I should read Greetings, Rob, like Dieter does. So, Greetings, Rob, but that's not Willow Yang. Well, here's the letter that might test your limits. My feelings toward the modern Star Trek movies. Just a bit of background information. I had never seen an episode of classic Star Trek until last year. The franchise just wasn't in the cultural zeitgeist when I was growing up. The last series, Enterprise, ended around the time when I started high school. I don't know what the viewership for the show was, but nobody I knew ever watched it, or any of the other more recent Star Trek shows. We knew Star Wars thanks to the prequels, and we all loved Lord of the Rings, and we were seeing the rise of the superhero genre with X-Men movies and the Dark Knight trilogy and the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and everyone was watching anime and reading manga, Harry Potter, Twilight, later on the Hunger Games. There was only one guy I knew who was an actual Trekkie, and that was, of course, John. But he doesn't often talk about Trek, other than the occasional reference or naming a werewolf in one of his stories, Dwight Schultz. The first time that I really became aware of Star Trek was when Star Trek 09 came out. I was pretty late to seeing the movie. I wasn't really into science fiction, to be honest. It wasn't a popular genre when I was growing up in China. I enjoyed the Star Wars prequels in spite of their flaws, and I loved Firefly, but for the most part, I wasn't interested in spaceships. I hated technobabble. Am I supposed to understand what they're talking about? My friends, however, saw Star Trek 09 and apparently enjoyed it. So when it finally came out on DVD, I rented it from my local library, and I'm not going to lie, I really liked the movie. I found the cast of characters to be delightful, and no, not just because I enjoy oogling Chris Pine. One anime that I'd watched religiously in high school was Naruto, and the trio of Kirk, Spock, and Uhura instantly reminded me of Team 7. Kirk was Naruto, the hot-headed, immature, and audacious main hero. Spock was Sasuke, the calm, intellectual, and somewhat aloof best friend rival. Coincidentally, Sasuke also experienced a tremendous loss involving the massacre of most of his people. And Uhura was Sakura, the shafted female side character who doesn't really serve much purpose other than act as the love interest to one of the male leads. Knowing nothing of Star Trek lore, I didn't know what Romulans were, and I thought the reveal that Nero was from the future and had created an alternate timeline was really interesting. Of course, I didn't understand what Nero was doing floating around in space for 20 plus years, and I found him to be a forgettable villain, but I still had a great time with the movie. Going into Star Trek Into Darkness again, I had no knowledge of the franchise apart from the preceding film. The only additional thing I was aware of was that everyone was saying Benedict Cumberbatch must be playing a character named Khan, who was apparently a villain from one of the older Star Trek movies. Now, I'm not a Cumberbitch. I find Cumberbatch to be only sexy from certain angles. I do think he's a great actor, however, and he didn't disappoint me in Into Darkness. He had a formidable, commanding presence, and I love the way that he enunciated his words. He had me riveted every time he was on screen. However, I was admittedly a little bewildered when his full name was revealed to be Khan Noonien Singh. Okay, when I heard Khan, I'd assumed it was some kind of alien name or code name, but Khan Noonien Singh? You can't have a character with a name like that and cast probably the pastiest British actor I've ever seen. It's a little jarring. I also didn't care for Alice Eve's Dr. Carol Marcus, and I couldn't buy into her being a scientist. And of course, the whole thing of Khan's blood apparently being able to bring people back from the dead was lazy. Nonetheless, in spite of my gripes, I'd be lying through my teeth if I said that I didn't enjoy the movie. Even though I wish that Cumberbatch had been an original villain, he was still a joy to watch. And then there's the final film, Star Trek Beyond. The general consensus I got from fans of classic Star Trek is that it's the best of the worst. My biggest issue with Beyond is that I didn't really care for the main antagonist. I felt that Idris Elba was wasted in this movie. Conversely, I quite liked Sofia Boutella's Jayla. I thought she was kick-ass. Moreover, I thought that Beyond had probably the most heart out of the three modern Trek films and probably the best character relationships. I like the dynamic between Jayla and Scotty. I get a smile when I see the rapport between Spock and McCoy. Until I started watching your channel, I had been completely unaware of the fan backlash against modern Star Trek movies. The only thing I knew is that all 3 films had received glowing reviews from both critics and the general audience. The YouTube pundits that I'd listened to over the years, Chris Stuckman, Jeremy Johns, Christian Harloff, and Mark Ellis, have all been highly positive on the movies. In his review on AMC, John Schnepp, rest in peace, called Into Darkness the best movie I've seen so far this summer, and praised it for its smart writing, pacing, and references to the classic Star Trek movies. Thus, I was completely taken aback when I discovered that there's a large section of the fan base who not just didn't like the movies, but loathe them and seem to think they're worse than cancer. Well, they're not worse than cancer, but I do loathe them. Having now watched the original series and recently The Next Generation, I can understand the criticism that some classic Trekkies have. The Romulans weren't a weak race that couldn't save themselves. Khan, as I had suspected, wasn't a pasty British guy. Kirk wasn't a kleptomaniac who'd steal an idol from a pagan tribe just for kicks. The stories were supposed to be more intellectual and allegorical rather than generic action-adventure. Nevertheless, as someone who's watching the films with no expectations, no preconceived notions of what Star Trek ought to be, I found the movies to be fun and charming. They had all the action and spectacle for me to be entertained, but also a likable cast and interpersonal relationships that bring a smile to my face. In some ways, I think that many of us live inside our own echo chambers. People tend to follow and listen to those who share similar views to them. Reality is generally a lot more complicated. While my personal feelings toward modern Star Trek movies have not changed, I do appreciate being challenged, being given opposing points of view. As a wise Vulcan once stated, "I am pleased to see that we have differences. May we together become greater than the sum of both of us." Love long, oh, pardon me, that's a free enterprise thing. Live long and prosper, Willow. Perhaps I said it was a Freudian slip, Willow, because I love your letters. Now, look, I do not dislike you. I don't have a problem with you. I will not disown you. You will always be our adoptive doctor. You will always be the Willow Yang of legend. That will not change. And, I mean, this letter perfectly exemplifies what I'm talking about. I spent 40 years of my life, pretty much, as I was growing up, watching classic Star Trek. It was my mythology. I sat in my room thinking about it most of my days. I puzzled over it. I read hundreds of books and comics and reference book and essays, and for 40 years. So for 40 years, I watched Star Trek grow and change and evolve, and it was a certain thing. And for the most part, that 40-year history of Star Trek, at least for me, well, it was, 60. It wasn't totally 40 years for me. I would say it was probably 35 years, but it was it was a big deal to me, and it was a big part of my life. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a way of life, and Star Trek was a certain way, and it was presented in a certain way, and it all, in a way, also had ties to its original creator, Gene Roddenberry. Rick Berman, misguided though he might have been at some times, he thought he had hit upon a certain formula, and he was going to show a fealty to that formula and to Roddenberry. After all, he created, well, he didn't create it, but he worked with Gene Roddenberry. He was there with Roddenberry at the beginning of The Next Generation, so he was going to do that. The problem that I have with Star Trek now, and I think a problem that a lot of these franchises have when new creators come on board, Star Trek has all of the baggage of its own history and all of the pop culture perception that it carries with it. So my problem with Star Trek 09 is that it was made by somebody who admittedly in every interview he ever gave about Star Trek 09 said, "I was never a Star Trek fan." That was like the first thing out of his mouth. "I was never a Star Trek fan. Too intellectual. I was more of a Star Wars fan." So right then I knew we were in trouble. And as you very astutely point out, Star Trek has always been allegorical in nature. It's always been more about the intellectual than anything else. The action was always secondary. Because, look, a space battle is fine, but really it's all about either what goes on during the space battle with the characters, or what are the results of that battle, or what can we learn from that battle. If it's just an action scene for action's sake, it becomes space battle pornography, which, by the way, I love space battle pornography. I love spaceship pornography. Warp nacelles on Federation starships. I mean, I'm telling you, they made they give me a Major Woodman. He salutes. Look at those starships. You know what I'm saying? So it's true, and I do love that stuff. But it's sound and fury signifying nothing if it's not about anything, and that's my problem. And I think in modern Star Trek, the action is the end all be all. Like they throw in action scenes just to make the action scenes happen. Like, oh, let's have Kirk do let's have him go ship to ship into darkness. He can, with a spacesuit and a rocket pack. We'll have we'll make a great action scene. When really you could eliminate that, use the transporter stealthily, transport wherever you're going, and spend that extra action scene time doing something that's more intellectually or stimulating, or give me some great writing or speechifying instead. But no, with a big budget movie like that, let's throw in another action scene and create another obstacle, which Star Trek doesn't need. But I digress. The point I want to make is, you didn't watch Star Trek. It didn't dominate your life. So when you came to Star Trek and saw the movies, it was fresh. And I think the essence of Star Trek, even though I thought the characters as they were portrayed in Star Trek '09 are bastardized versions of those characters, they're still inspired by the originals. And if you found something to like in that, that means the DNA of Star Trek continued to work. And that's a good thing. And I think that's what people tend to forget about. I mean, Star Trek as a franchise will endure, despite the superficial, I guess, the shell of it all. It's still, at its core, Star Trek. And even in the worst Star Trek, there is part of that core that is retained. And if it brings you back, and like we've had great discussions, you've written me great letters about both the Next Generation, actually Deep Space Nine, the Next Generation, and the original series. So you've gone back and you've at least deemed them worthy enough to continue watching, and I've really appreciated your cogent analysis of the shows, which I think is great. So ultimately, I will never criticize somebody for telling them, or if they tell me that they've only ever seen the new Star Trek movies. Remember, Star Trek '09, I mean, if you were born in 2000... you were 9 years old when that movie came out. Why would you watch it necessarily? What unless you were specifically a science fiction fan, and now as you get older, you come to it later, and, that's what you saw. Nobody should, I say on the show all the time, nobody should ever tell you that your opinion is wrong. If you like the Star Wars prequels, because those are the first Star Wars movies you saw, then of course you're going to enjoy them. If you see Star Trek '09 and that's your first experience with Star Trek, your experience with Star Trek is way different than mine was. So I can't sit there and go, well, I mean, if you've only seen the new Star Trek movies, we have a little bit of an age difference, Willow. You didn't exist when I was growing up watching Star Trek in syndication as a kid. So how could anybody expect your experience of Star Trek to be the same as mine? That's ridiculous. Now, if we were contemporaries and went to school together, and I grew up with you, it'd be interesting to hear, knowing what your background is and all that. It'd be interesting to know what you'd think of it then. But I never get mad at people for their experience of things if it's different than mine. And that's, I think, something to remember. I think it's important. I think it's really important, actually. And before I jump into, let's see what other people are saying. I mean, an hour in, I might as well get into these live questions and things, right? Where am I? Oh, actually, first I missed one from yesterday. 123 Rock fan sent in a super chat yesterday and said, "Who'll retire first, Spielberg or Scorsese?" Ooh, I can't see. Barring health issues, will they retire? I don't think they will. I mean, Spielberg has got West Side Story coming out this Christmas. Hopefully it'll be open so we can see it. I can't wait. Scorsese just gave us The Irishman. He's going to be making this big Western. I don't see them ever retiring until they're infirm and they can't make movies anymore. And even then, as long as they can be wheeled out and sit up, I think they'll be directing films. I mean, I know I'd want them to be. Willow is here too. She sends in a tip, as she does every day. Thank you very much. Willow says, "Do you really want to be Merlin, though? In the original stories, he's kind of a perv who likes to take underage girls under his tutelage. He finally got his comeuppance when one of his apprentices outwitted him and sealed him in a tomb to die alone." A24 has an adaptation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight starring Dev Patel that was originally supposed to come out this week. Have you seen the trailer? I have not, but I'll watch that. That sounds great. It's an interesting approach they're taking to the original poem. It was a different time. And remember, I mean, we look back now, underage girls there was no such thing as underage girls back then because, people got married a lot younger because human lifespans were a lot shorter. But yeah, I think it's kind of creepy when we look back on it. You know what? I have to tell you, even when I was underage, I always liked older girls. Older girls always knew more than you did. And they could show you things that you needed to know, if you catch my drift. So, yeah, I was never one of these guys that, Merlin, yeah, Morgana, especially in Excalibur, turned on him. And while we never saw anything, there was no hanky-panky that went down between them. It was insinuated. But I still think that Merlin in Excalibur, he was trying to do the right thing ultimately. And Morgana, he underestimated her selfishness. Some would call her evil. But, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, though. I would like to see that. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I haven't even heard of that. I want to check that out. Julius Goodwin, who informed us yesterday that he's been a very generous member of the Post-Geek Singularity. I thank him for being here, and he's new. So, welcome, Julius. He's a vibrant member of the community. He sends in a super chat, and he says, actually, 2 super chats. Again, your generosity is, thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. Julius says, well, I've decided to join the Burnettwork. I hereby decree that my singularity identity shall be harmonic dissonance. Ooh, I like that. But I'm still trying to decide between gold and platinum levels. The main thing that's making me hesitate from platinum level is the fact that I know I have neither the knowledge or experience for your advisory board, except maybe when it comes to suggesting the color of your pants to wear. Well, sir, what's really interesting about that is if you become a member, I think you'd be the first member. So we would be creating that together, and we could tailor the advisory board to your strengths. So that would be kind of interesting. I mean, look, I think it'd be great to have people that I could bounce ideas off of. I want to expand the channel and make it bigger and do more things. And the whole point of joining the Burnettwork was to be able to do that. One of the things I'd like to do is to get better graphics, buy different cameras, and those things, they get very expensive very quickly. So if you want to join, please do so, and we can talk about it afterwards, or what you'd like to see. What do you want to get out of your membership of the Burnettwork? You heard me talking about some of the stuff yesterday I want to do. So look, I would love to get, based on the article I read to you, I would love to start that kind of a studio. And rather than go, wouldn't it be interesting as if you had investors in your studio, like that would own and would go every step of the way? I mean, wouldn't it be interesting if I could change over, like with super chats or all these things, that they would actually go toward building something, some equity stake in a project? I know like Legion M wants to do all that, but what I want to do is I want to build a studio where everybody contributing is actually participating on a daily basis. Look, a lot of people are going to be bored stiff. I mean, movie sets are not exactly the most riveting places. You know what's really interesting about a movie set? I'll tell you a funny secret about a movie set that nobody ever really talks about, but it's always striking to me. Like, you can stand on a movie set and you can hang out all day, and you can literally watch scenes and takes of each scene all day long, but you'll never get a sense of what the finished film feels like. Now, when you go over and you watch the monitor, you go into Video Village or wherever the monitor is, and you can watch what the camera's actually getting, you'll get a sense of each individual shot and how it's probably going to work. But what you won't get is a sense of how it's all going to be cut together and work, because just the way it goes now with modern technology, and an editor can actually be on set. I've done this, and I've put together scenes while we were shooting on the day, like literally right there. I can sit there with the laptop, the DIT will bring over a drive for me when the footage is processed. Is like, here you go, and I can sit there and cut footage sitting right next to the director and show the director a cut while we're shooting. I've done that before, and it's quite interesting, but that would be interesting. Mukbang sends in a super chat and says, thanks for not disabling the super chat feature. Some of us super chat more to make up the 30%. We care. Well, Mukbang, I really appreciate that. You're also very generous with the channel, and you're funny too, so that's always good. No, it's very weird. I don't know what happened. It's very strange. So, like right now, I'll tell you what I've seen. Right now, it shows on my screen that I have 49 viewers, and it shows a chat revenue. Well, I know that's wrong. That's wrong. So I have to continue. This is something that's happened in the last week with YouTube. I refresh, right? And I wait for it to refresh, and I'm waiting. Okay, there are 267 viewers. Hello, everybody. And hello to all the new subscribers that are in this chat right now. 267 people. But I couldn't see that. I also couldn't see Super Chats. Luckily, it's somehow connected back to my software, the Stream Elements software, so I can actually see things as they're coming in live. I don't know what they've done. I don't know what YouTube has done, but it's really frustrating. And I don't know what's going on. But I kept it on. It seems to be working. Bob Tozzi is here, and he sends in a tip, and he says, in regards to the legal hoops that needed to be jumped through for the Snyder Cut, do those same legalities apply when making and releasing alternate cuts of movies, i.e. director's cuts, ultimate editions, etc.? If not, what is the difference? Okay, here's the big difference between the Snyder Cut of Justice League and the movie that was released as I understand it. So, Justice League was a finished film. When you sign up, your contract specifically states that you've signed up for a specific movie, that kind of thing. And the movie was made and it was done. It was done. Now, I guess this could be considered an alternate cut of the film, but actually what I think we're going to be seeing is ultimately it's a totally new movie. It's a totally new version of the film. It's not an alternate cut of what was released. It is a new reimagining of that material. So, again, I don't know what the legalities are. There's always, if you have an actor who you own the actor's performance. I mean, you own it. But if there's actors that weren't there in the first place, that were cut out, that were never part of the release version of the film, and you're going to put them back in, and also, actors get residuals and things. So, do they get residuals from this version of the movie? Does all of that just simply roll over? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. But there are many different questions that, because, again, you got residuals for Justice League. Everything that you signed up for is going on, has happened. Justice League was in the theaters, then it wound up on cable, it was released on, and streaming, it was released on home video. So all those things are happening. Then this comes along, and it's a different entity entirely. Because you've still got the revenue stream from not for Warner Brothers, but the things that people are supposed to be getting paid for, that's all happening with Justice League. This is then in addition to that. So I don't know. Is it a new entity? Does it have a different copyright? I don't know. So that's what I'm mostly interested in, is how does that work? How does the Writers Guild of America, is the writing credit different? Does Joss Whedon get a credit on this movie? Either as a writer, I would imagine not. And then if that's not the case, then it is a different entity, and how does that work? I don't know. I really want to wear. I really want to wear. I really want to know where. Fortunato sends in a tip and says, I can wear it, Holmes. Fortunato says, top of the hour, I was asking about this awesome shirt, which I love. And by the way, I've washed it, so it feels really good, too. So this is the Han Cholo shirt that I asked about. Can I get away with wearing the shirt? So now Fortunato gives me an answer. That's good to know, because I like this shirt, and it was given to me by a fan. Like, it was a gift. So, but I don't know why. Like, this is where my brain is at. Normally I would throw it on and go, who cares? But in this day and age, I think I should stop and ask who cares. That's why I thought I'd bring it up. So Fortunato says that. That's good. Anthony Gonzalez says, I just wanted to say, in my all-time favorite show, the episode Meridian is totally absurd that no one stopped to question Jadzia wanting to stay on a planet that will disappear for 60 years, since I seriously doubt she was given the Dax symbiote for that. Anthony is talking about what I think is one of the worst episodes of Deep Space Nine, Meridian, which is, I think, based on Brigadoon, I think you're right, Anthony. You and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, as you know. Nick Parrish sends in a tip, 1 out of 2. He says, Happy Memorial Day, Rob. Today is not only a day where I show gratitude to our brave military veterans, but it is also a day where we should say happy birthday, in my opinion, to the greatest Punisher of all time, Ray Stevenson. While I thought John Barenthal was great, please don't get me wrong, Ray Stevenson had the perfect look, and the portrayal seems straight from the comics, and in a good way. Punisher Warzone is easily ranked my most underrated comic book movie of all time. Well, Lexi Alexander would probably agree with you. And, she's on Twitter. You can find her. So if you haven't, you should find her, the director of that movie. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, what would be your pitch to merge Star Wars and MCU in a what-if film? Wow, that is really interesting. I mean, if I had to do a what-if film set in the Star Wars universe, well, it would have to be the Guardians of the Galaxy somehow wind up in the Star Wars universe. I don't know if I would put them in the same era as A New Hope, the original trilogy. But I would definitely have the Guardians of the Galaxy wind up in the Star Wars universe. Well, the Star Wars, the crossover, it could be interesting. I mean, what if, I don't know, the Yuzon Vong come and you need the Nova Corps and the Guardians of the Galaxy? I don't know. It'd be to put me on the spot is tough, but I like the idea of it. It could be a lot of fun to do something along those lines. But I don't know what my actual storyline would be. I'd have to think about that. I guess, though, that Star Wars takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. That means that our contemporary Marvel Cinematic Universe would exist. The Star Wars universe would be far, far in the future beyond the sequel trilogy, and that could be interesting. What if... I mean, it would be interesting to... I think it'd have to be more like a heist movie. Like Rafifi or something like that, or Michael Mann's Thief. I don't know. That's a good question. Now I'm going to think about that all day, so thanks a lot. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a super chat, or sends in a tip and says, the last decent Star Trek film with a decent Star Trek story was Insurrection. Nemesis was brain dead, too. Nemesis was brain dead, the whole idea of... Insurrection, I think it's a bad rap, and if anybody's interested, get Michael Pillar's book. It's only available online places, about writing Insurrection, about what could have been. They really wanted to do a Joseph Conrad Hearts of Darkness story, which I think would be really, really great, but they couldn't do it, unfortunately. Brandon Sheehy sends in a super chat and says, what are your thoughts on Malcolm McDowell and Generations? I thought Malcolm McDowell was great, being of the same race as Guinan, he was a listener. We're a race of listeners. I thought that was really great. I just thought the whole idea of the Nexus was dumb, and the idea that he just basically Malcolm McDowell in that movie, Soren just wants to get back to the Nexus, which is basically the Matrix. He wants to live in his blissed out fake world, his fake universe forever, which I thought was, I mean, if I had made that movie, if I had made Generations, I would have made it more about the fact that Malcolm McDowell wanted this illusion, this idea, and this goes all the way back to The Cage. Would you rather live in an illusion that's perfect, that you feel good in, or would you rather live in the real world? There could have been some really interesting philosophical stuff going on in Generations, and they didn't go that direction. Soren misguided, wanting to live in nirvana like so many people do, and maybe when he gets there, it's a trap. It's not real, but I don't know. I mean, I liked him in it a lot. I just didn't like the movie very much, unfortunately. Our friend Claudius is here. Claudius Noonin Singh sends in a tip and says, Monsieur Robert, my old friend, do you know of the Klingon proverb that tells us revenge is a dish best served cold? It is very cold in space. So Willow likes new Star Trek and I love Skyfall. Does it feel like we're burying you alive? No. It does not. By the way, Claude has written Elizabeth and I like a 6-page script that we have to perform. I don't think we're going to be able to perform it tonight because we haven't looked at it enough because Elizabeth is in school. And so, yeah, it's great, though. I can't wait. Maybe Wednesday. For those of you who might wonder, tonight on Elizaviews, we're doing Unwinding About Movies at 6 o'clock, our new time. We're doing it at 6 p.m. We're doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade because they're searching for the Holy Grail the way Percival was in Excalibur. So there you go. That should be fun. But people aren't going to like what I have to say about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Claude. So if you're a big fan of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, tune in tonight because it should be a barn burner of a show. And we've got more. Claude sent us some wine, Claude and the lovely Candida and their son Spencer. You know, it's funny. I saw a picture of Claude and Candida. I guess it was their house. I don't know if it's Claude's collection or Spencer's collection, but they have, one of them has the Y-wing with the cowling on it, the yellow from Clone Wars that was actually created, Steve Melching wrote my friend Steve that I've known since film school for 30 years, wrote that episode that introduced that, and they have the toy of it, and I never got it, and one day I have to because I really want it. I know that's just a geeky aside, but there you go. Star Wars Rock sends in a tip and says, something I want to see is a live-action Troll Hunters movie, and I think the right way to do it would be by having the cartoon's original creator in Guillermo del Toro on as an executive producer. I think that'd be cool. Look, anything that Guillermo does is good. So let me jump in. I've got more letters, people. I've got more letters. Another letter from Muad'Dib. Hard versus soft magic systems and verisimilitude. Hey, Rob, so during our Coronacation, I've never heard that one. That's a new one. Coronacation. We've been going back and doing lots of So, Rob, during our Coronacation, we've been going back and doing lots of rewatches, one of those being the Harry Potter movies. And on a side note, an independent theater nearby is opening up on Memorial Day with restrictions on attendance, and they're playing the first two of these movies along with the latest Jumanji and one other film. And yes, we'll be there watching The Sorcerer's Stone. So excited to get back to the theater. Now hear me out. I love the Harry Potter films, their books, the universe. Going through the movies, though, I always mentally stammer a bit, though, when it comes to the magic system. Why spend so much of their formative years learning spells, etc.? After all, it's Leviusa, not Leviusa. When it also seems that with a few unconscious flicks of their wands, they can do all kinds of other magics. From a narrative standpoint, yes, it'd be a little silly in the middle of a wizard duel to hear both parties yelling out every spell. And we actually see a bit of this when the kids are fighting against the Death Eaters. The former are all yelling, Expelliarmus, or Petrificus Totalis, while the former are just whipping their wands back and forth, blocking and attacking, etc. So it doesn't ruin it for me by any means, but it really cements my preference toward hard magic systems versus soft ones. Hard magic systems are much harder to write and make sure the characters abide by, etc., but really lend themselves to a sense of verisimilitude, while soft ones, I think, can better suit certain narrative purposes and can be used more easily as literary devices, but rely on the reader or viewer to just kind of go with it. The problem here, though, is that they can get pushed too far, and the reader-viewer who is just going with it all of a sudden gets thrown way off. When written well, though, both serve quite well. Star Wars Force users can be examples of soft systems working well. The Jedi and the Sith alike were able to manipulate the energies of all living things around them to do some pretty amazing feats. I even went with it up through the idea of Force Skyping, but then when all of a sudden physical matter started being able to pass through countless light years of distance, just no. Hard systems done right, though, add much credibility into a specific universe's lore, and I feel add stakes as there are built-in limitations. Consider the schools in Dune. You have the clearly defined Bene Gesserit, the Mentats, the Swordmasters, the Navigators, etc., each with an extremely well-evolved but clearly defined set of abilities that allow certain things but not everything. Thus the need for each school to still try and bandy about the universe for power and influence, none having a super clear advantage over the others, and it's very believable in the original 6 books. Now, when the prequel books were written, Frank Herbert's son took too many liberties with the original formation of these schools. We saw them in their infancy during the Machine Crusades evolve out of necessity. Okay, fine. But by the end of the prequel novels, members of these schools had gotten to the point of being almost to what we'd come to know in the original books, set 10,000 years after them. So in a few years, they evolved to that point, but then given another 10,000 years, we only see a gradual increase in ability? Did they have a cap or something? A reason to stop the ability evolution? Narrative choices can sometimes diminish the literary rules to their detriment. In the Avatar series, bending is a pretty hard system that works very well for the most part, but it even takes too many liberties sometimes. I absolutely believe that Torf, as powerful as she is, developed mental bending by learning to manipulate the mineral composition of metals, but too often she was seen deflecting airborne articles coming towards her, even though blind. I liked her vibration-based sense of sight, but I doubt it applied to things in the air. Also, in Korra, as cool as lava bending is, I never truly bought it in Bolin as one either were meant to believe that lava is just always that accessible under any given stretch of Earth for him to summon it at will, or that he can turn Earth into lava, which is how previous avatars did it, but then they encompassed all four elements, so firebending was theirs too, and not Bolin's. A deal breaker? Nah, I love both these stories, but still, it makes you go, Now take other hard magic systems. Aragon's magic had an actual cost in life energy. For the other relative shortcomings in that series, I always thought this was really intriguing, that every spell cast costs a certain amount, and too big of a cast could kill the caster, unless they'd stored up life energies previously to call upon, but even this storing up either needed to come from them gradually over time, or from other life forms nearby, which took its own emotional toll on the magician. Really raises the stakes when it's not an endless pool of power to draw on. One of the masters of hard systems, in my opinion, is Brandon Sanderson with his Allomancy, burning ingested metals to specific effects, in the Mistborn series, or even further, the Fabrial, Surge Binding, and Void Binding in the Stormlight archives. He goes to great lengths to establish a firm set of rules that govern power and its various uses, and finds a great balance between its uses, its limits, and how those very things impact the users thereof. Soft systems sometimes enhance the universe they are found in. Cool, magic. But hard systems done well enhance the characters that are able to utilize the magics within those parameters. Cool, magic users. Anyway, Rob, I can't recall if this has been a topic here before, so forgive me if it has, but I'm curious, what are your feelings on soft versus hard systems, and do you personally have any favorites from literature or movies? Well, again, first of all, great letter. It all speaks to verisimilitude. Like, what do you believe in a system that, and how is it being depicted? Like, look, with Excalibur, Anal Nathra, Uthras Bethod, all that. I love all that. I love conjuring spells. But when you're fighting somebody with magic, being able to cast spells would look ridiculous from a dramatic standpoint. I mean, I always prefer, I think, hard systems as opposed to soft. Some kind of, like, the idea that Force users are using the energy that surrounds us and binds us. Force energy is always around us. And if you're an adept Force user, you're channeling that energy, whatever it is. Now, I like the fact that there are limitations to that. Most people can't do those things. But sometimes, like, when I was playing, what was it, Force Unleashed, and you get to pull a Star Destroyer out of the sky, I almost bought into that because I figured, okay, maybe there's a way when you're on a planet, you can actually channel the planet's force energy somehow. I just preferred that kind of thing because I believe in that. And that's kind of what I prefer that. But that's why I say I don't like the idea that force energy, you could immediately heal people if somebody is wounded, that you can suddenly, like, because your force energy then is now you're speeding up people's metabolisms and things like that. I don't think that's part of what being a force user would allow you to be able to do, to be honest. I think there are things that you can manipulate things and all that are bound by that energy. But the idea of speeding up somebody's healing, that you're speeding up their metabolism, I don't necessarily think that's a force power. And I hate stuff like that. This is from Omar94. Congratulations on getting to episode 425 of Robservations. I just wanted to give you 3 recommendations to you, your moderators, and viewers for movies to check out if you haven't, which I like and I think are underappreciated, so here goes. My first recommendation is a 1942 musical comedy called You Were Never Lovelier with Fred Astaire and Rita Hayworth. Despite his well-known dancing partnership with Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire called Rita Hayworth his favorite dancing partner. Yeah, I'll bet he did. Hubba hubba. My second recommendation is a 1945 musical called Anchors Aweigh, which is great, with Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra. The movie has the famous scene of Gene Kelly dancing with Jerry from Tom and Jerry. My third and final recommendation is 1997's George of the Jungle with Brendan Fraser and Leslie Mann, alongside Thomas Hayden Church and John Cleese, who does the voice of an ape. Those are my 3 recommendations. You Were Never Lovelier, Anchors Aweigh, and George of the Jungle. That is 1 triple bill, my friend. That is 1 triple bill. How crazy is that? It's been a long time since I've received a letter from this person. You know who's back? That head. That head. I imagine that head is a disembodied head with just a gigantic, just smoking the dankest nugs in some gigantic, like, baseball bat-sized doobie. No, it wouldn't be a doobie, would it? I don't know what would you call a baseball bat-sized joint? I don't know what that would be. So that head is here. Boob. I was just thinking again about that laugh-out-loud argument you made for the changing of Keynes into a woman. Dr. Keynes, I would say Kynes. Dr. Kynes into a woman. I wonder if enough time has passed yet for you to realize how out of touch you sounded. Well, gee, if Leto II can make an army of fish speakers all women, then why can't Denis Villeneuve, who cares if the beginning is a delicate time for making sure balances are correct? That's like when J.J. Abrams got that idea, what if Raylo plays tug-of-war with a spaceship and then it explodes, and the people will cheer me? Not really worth a verbal response, but I guess I just feel like putting a pile of snack sugar in front of you as a treat. You're welcome, I whispered that. I liked that response and question you answered at the 1 hour and 9 minute mark of episode 423. I agreed with most of what you said. I like Villeneuve, but he's a bit overrated. There's just this meandering he does in Blade Runner, Arrival, and Prisoners that keeps them kind of in the mediocre tier for me. Even Sicario and Enemy had a bit of that, but in there it worked to an advantage, and in the end, it made the films better. Incendies is top tier, though. I gave that 7.1, but it might be 7.5. Incendies is great. I need to see it again. I only ever watched that once. The same with Polytechnique. I've never seen that, actually. I've made some progress into that list of 50s, 60s, and 70s sci-fi horror flicks you recommended, back when you listed a bunch of them. I need to go back and try and find that show date, because a lot of the flicks I'd already downloaded, so I need to add some to my queue. Maybe I'll copy and paste the list of my ratings so far this year. Last night I watched Genesis 2 from 1973. Wow. Well, it was more like around dinner time, but then I watched Blood Machines, which you should definitely check out ASAP, followed by Planet Earth. It made a cool double feature because of the unexpected woman theme in them both. I'm going to put on Strange New World tonight. You're going for all those pilots, man. Kind of weirded out they used the same actor in the remake. I'd never heard of them doing that. I'm going to upload a 400 megabyte version of Grand's, aka Border 2018, to this Vola room so you can preview it. I'll upload it and the subs, I can't vouch for the subs though, every 2 days for a week so you have time to grab it before the files expire. So pay attention to the expiration date. Hopefully the little gnome-looking guy who reads these messages first will promptly forward this to you as a top priority. Then you can properly decide if it's a flick that'll be good for whining about movies. I think it'll make a good conversation piece. It's bizarre. Yeah, Border is bizarre. But yeah, you'll get at least a decent 576p version. So just watch the 25-minute up until you meet Vor and then decide if you need a better copy. I'll do that. I love your letters, by the way. I would really hear what you thought of Genesis 2 and Strange New Worlds. What would you think of that? That's interesting. And Planet Earth. And, of course, Blood Machines. Like I told everybody, Turbo Killer, Seth Eicherman is the man. and you need to watch it. It's on Shudder. Blood Machines is on Shudder now. This comes from PO2S. It's pretty funny. PO2S. Hello again. I can honestly say I was quite surprised to find that you had not only received my previous letter email, but that you found it worthy of being read aloud on YouTube. I would have thought that I'd gone on too long, and that even in an edited form that it would not function well for your YouTube podcast. Thanks for providing a lot of interesting content to watch up on YouTube, by the way. Again, I've been watching on and off since learning about your involvement with the TNG Blu-rays, so I'm a bit of a newcomer, I suppose. I had an idea for how to fix or at least improve Star Trek Picard. Since Starfleet is effectively the military, I know they're explorers, but NASA didn't equip the lunar modules with missiles and strap the astronauts with small arms, and we can often see the crew perform what we call commerals. That's the first part of this, and you can easily separate this into two different topics, with the first being a fixing a premise for Star Trek Picard existing, and the second a criticism for how the Next Generation struggled with character growth. Since we saw in the episode All Good Things that Dr. Crusher was commanding a kind of medical ship, if we took that and consider that to be a type of MSC ship, then this could assist in specific areas like disaster relief that often requires a lot of medical assistance. Unfortunately, with this being decades later from the Next Generation, you wouldn't see any of the regular TNG characters or even Deep Space Nine or Voyager characters, since they would have long since retired. However, could have Picard as an ambassador or archaeologist that goes along to help mediate affairs and also does presentations on lectures on dead or near-extinct cultures, that field of expertise. He could travel with Dr. Crusher as his wife. She could have her own career that she works as, say, a Starfleet contractor, because, again, all of them would have long since retired from active duty. As Patrick Stewart loves the sex and shooting, there could have been any number of tensions and dangerous situations that Starfleet would be assisting in. Say, claim over ownership of some highly valued old technology that is unearthed somewhere, and it risks being destroyed in the fighting that is sparked due to the disaster or perhaps because of it. One side blames the other because of a history dealing with stealing and turning the technology to less favorable goals. Picard could have accompanied the ship sent to help provide relief, which could be manned by all new characters. He's eager to attempt an intervention between the factions so that the recently discovered wealth of artifacts and technology is both properly excavated and treated with the respect it deserves, being a piece of history for the particular planet. Tensions are running high, and it's a race against time, as if things will just blow up or not, and Starfleet has been called in for help by part of one faction against the overall notion of others that calling for outsiders will only make things worse. As this is not a Federation planet, but having been invited, the ships and the crews must strike a balance in this area of that planet. As you said yourself, life has become cheap in J.J. Kurtzman Trek, and so is logic for that matter. So having a dedicated Ambassador Picard who wants to preserve not only the archaeological culture, but the lives of those people as well is better suited to the character. One of the biggest problems that much of Star Trek faced was that they almost always had the same characters in the same ranks and the same positions on the ship. It tended to keep characters stagnant when they needed to grow and advance both metaphorically and literally, as their positions, ranks, and duties did not. Counselor Troy, who should have been an extension of the ship's captain, or extension of the ship's chaplain, and it did not require explicitly saying what denomination of faith and in what rank, and what in fact would work fine without many Wait a minute. Hang on. Counselor Troy, who should have been an extension of a ship's chaplain, and it did not require explicitly saying what denomination of faith, and in fact would work fine without it, as many service members talk to and use the chaplain's position for a variety of things, regardless of their faith. And she is only explicitly mentioned to have the rank of lieutenant commander in what, season 5? Her motivation in seeking to switch from being a staff officer to a line officer so that she can command was too good to waste as just being a B-plot, and deserved at least a little more attention, as it gave a little nod to the kinds of decisions she would carry. I would say that the best decisions the writers could have done would be to promote Captain Picard to Admiral. That is what defines a flagship, after all. Have Commander Riker remain as captain of the Enterprise from Best of Both Worlds, and this would allow Picard the opportunity to be more free to pick and choose locations and activities for the ship to engage in. That's actually a really interesting idea. I like that. Suddenly it got really hot in here, and it does when the sun changes. Well, thank you for that letter. That's interesting. I like that. Yeah. Let me jump back to where we were here. Stubble McShave says, a report on the incentives of the Wheel of Time production in the Czech Republic indicates they spent $75 million for the 8 episodes. This doesn't include the salaries for most of the cast and crew. It doesn't cover most of post-production either. It indicates $15 to $25 million per episode. Well, Stubble, that's a huge amount of money. You should be stoked. Yeah, the incentives. You know, I don't know what the Czech Republic incentives are like. I know that they're good, but if they spent $75 million, that means they're spending $75 million in country. So that's pretty great for the 8 episodes. Wow, I think we're going to get something really, really special with that. So that's amazing. Very exciting. Eric G sends in tips and says, hearing you talk about sexy starships reminds me of the film Battle Beyond the Stars. In it, the sentient starship Nell appears to be, shall we say, well endowed. Do you think this was an unintentional design fluke by the filmmakers or intentional? Well, since Nell is a female starship, no. I mean, I think, for those of you who don't know Battle Beyond the Stars, the starship Nell, which Shad pilots, Richard Thomas's character, not only does it look feminine, but if you look at it straight up and down, it actually looks like a woman's entire reproductive system. So I think maybe that's where they got it from. I mean, in a way, it's not Giger-esque, but it's definitely biomechanical in a way. I have always liked that. I thought that was good. Very interesting. Claudius Chabrol, I'd love to see that. I love nice reference to the filmmaker. Michaud Robert, why not do a version of Elizaviews that focuses on romantic films for date night? Candida and I'm sure others, loved Betty Blue and In the Mood. We're waiting for the Amelie special. Please consider The English Patient and Chocolat. I would love to do The English Patient. I was thinking about that just yesterday. So yeah, I would do that. Alexander Wilson is here. He sends in a tip and says, I like the idea of doing romantic movies. Maybe we'll do that for like a week. We'll do 3 romantic movies. I think that'd be good. Alexander Wilson says, cinematic disappointment, Terminator Dark Fate. With Cameron and Tim Miller on board, I thought this was going to be a good movie. Instead, we got a lazy movie that rehashed old items and elements. It had the same ending as T3. What went wrong? I don't know, man. Terminator Dark Fate bummed me out. Bummed me out. I'm not gonna lie. Bummed me out. Yeah. It did bum me out. So yeah. I don't know. I don't know what went wrong. I mean, I think, look, they were trying to update it for a new generation, I guess. But it's strange. I honestly don't know what happened. It baffles me. I'm baffled. I'm vexed and baffled by it all. I don't know. Gerald sends in a tip and said, I've heard that YouTube takes 30% of Super Chats. They do. What about tips? I'm trying to figure out a best way to support you. Tips are great. But when you send in a tip, it's probably best to market, I think, friends and family. Because YouTube takes a bit. I mean, PayPal takes a bite too. But tips are way better. But thank you for that. I very much appreciate that. Star Wars Rock says, if you want to know where or how you can watch Troll Hunters, it's a Netflix original series. Oh, I know. And it's delightful. I like it. Brendan Sheehy sends in a super chat and says, crossover with Buckaroo Banzai in the MCU. Could it work? Oh, that would be hilarious. The Blue Blazer regulars in the MCU? Sure, why not? I would love to see that. I think that'd be great. It'd be hilarious. Dan V sends in a tip and says, I'm not a fan of the idea of combining Star Wars and the MCU, but Patton Oswalt already did it on Parks and Rec. That's right. I would recommend Star Wars Legacy. It's set about 140 years after A New Hope, and it was a great series with the third and final epic collection in July. You know what? I don't have that. I should get that. Is it in hardcover? I would dig that. David Crabtree is here. Hey, Rob, just stopping by to show support for the show and the channel. Obscure movie recommendation of the day, Grease 2. Come on, man. Michelle Pfeiffer's a pink lady. Growing up seeing it on cable so often, I always preferred this to the first film. It's silly, but the songs are ridiculously catchy. I liked Grease 2, mainly because of Michelle Pfeiffer. Stubble McShave is here, and And by the way, David, congratulations on continuing work on your comic. That'll be great to see. Stub McShave is here, sends in a tip and says, again, a suggestion. Instead of doing the alphabetical movies list, you could pick out 2 or 3 obscure movies that illustrates a point from an article you're reading on the show. Ooh, I like that idea. I've always liked the movie recommendations, but often thought there were a few too many. Ooh, Stubble, I like that idea. That's a really good idea. That is a good idea. Wow. Cardinal Sin sends in a super chat and says, actually, the moonwalkers, our American astronauts, did carry pistols. That's what I thought. I thought they did. And hearing that makes sense. That makes sense. Claudius Gold 1, Gold Leader. Some on the what is it? What does he say? I forget. Some on the surface, something like that. Claudius says, Rob, that's very cool that your friend created the BTLB. Yes, is it the BTLB Y-Wing Starfighter Fighter Bomber? Most of our collection is Clone Wars era. I actually found the Y-Wing at TJ Maxx for $20. I also bought our B-Wing there, but that's still in the box. Oh, man. I love that you and Spencer have a collection of those things. I got to bust out, I've got all these Sideshow / Hot Toys Clone Warriors. I got to bring those out because I have a lot. Star Wars Rock says, didn't realize that you've watched and are familiar with Troll Hunters. I am indeed familiar with Troll Hunters. Yes, I am. Mainly because I've been looking at lots of animation on Netflix because I've been working on a Netflix animated show. I don't know if have I told everybody that. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I must cut this a little short. I wanted to go a little longer, but we'll be back at 6 o'clock on Elizaviews. I got more letters to read that I'm going to read tomorrow. I'll be on longer tomorrow, obviously. But, so I'm going to bring this Memorial Day edition of Robservations, episode 425. 425 for May 25th, actually. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank, of course, Mike Bodden. I want to thank Jordy, wait, I'm backwards. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Detective Jim and his wife Heidi. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Louis Yu and Jordy Lyons. And I also want to thank, of course, the Richard for running those great watch parties. Last night we were watching a little bit of RoboCop was on the watch party on the Post-Geek Singularity. The Richard's always putting something interesting on. And he's also over at the Whining About Movies Facebook page. So I'm going to end today's show. I've got more letters to get to, obviously, but I'll get to those tomorrow. We will be back at 6 o'clock tonight with Whining About Movies, episode 32. I can't believe 32 episodes. And we will be talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which celebrated its 31st birthday yesterday. So, crazy. And, yeah, hopefully you'll see us there. Dan V says, Dark Horse put out Star Wars Legacy with the 3 books in hardcover. Ooh, Marvel's re-releases are paperback. There will be a 4th set 1 year later with Ania Solo. And the first 3 tell Cade Skywalker's story. I call it the Game of Thrones of Star Wars. It does have a better ending. Wow. Well, I'll get that then. That'd be awesome. So there you go. So, yeah, we will be back tonight of course, we will be back at 6 talking about the last, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which fits together with Excalibur. So, hope to see you all there. That's in a mere 3 hours and, 17 minutes? So, I want to thank you all for being here on this holiday Memorial Day. What a strange Memorial Day it is. But anyway, it's great to have you here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody for the generous support of this channel and for writing in letters and all that. As they said in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, dice are rolling. Good things are happening. Good things are afoot. And I'm very excited about all of them. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will say, as always, have a better day. And we will see you in 3 hours on Whining About Movies, episode 32, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.